Hey, friends, welcome to the Connected Mom podcast, where we really have real conversations to help you hopefully connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your child. And I have a feeling today's topic is going to be a hot topic, as they say, for many of you. So, if you're out there and maybe you've struggled with, gaining baby weight and you can't seem to get it off, or you've had other health issues related to your weight and feeling good, I want you to tune in and listen. I really want to recommend that you get like a pad and that you write down some notes from this one because I think it's going to be life changing for you. So my guest today is Christine Trimpe, and she is a health and wellness coach. And she is the author of the new book called SugarFreed. And I know so many moms are concerned about the amount of sugar that their kids are eating and that the amount of sugar that maybe they're consuming. And yet I think it's a little bit addictive. And Christine is going to help us with that today. She's a coach, she's an author, she's a speaker. And if you want to learn more about her, we're going to have all her information in the show notes. But for right now, just tune in and listen and ask the Lord to speak to you as we talk about this important topic together. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you for having me, Becky. I'm so excited to be here to speak to your moms.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. So before we get into this, tell us a little bit about your family.
All right, I have been married to my college sweetheart for almost 35 years now. We're going on 35 years this April. And yes, we have two adult children. They both live locally. My daughter lives 2 miles down the road. She's married to her high school sweetheart. And then my son lives with us still. And so I did go through years of raising them, and am still very connected to both of them.
Yeah, and the journey of motherhood, it doesn't end. I think a lot of times people think, okay, well, I've got 18 years with my child, and then motherhood is over, and I'm going to be on to the next thing. And that's not the way it goes. I have four adult kids. They all live close, and I have 14 grandchildren. And the journey of motherhood is just, it's never done, and it's a beautiful journey. But today we want to talk a little bit about your story and about getting sugar freed. I love that idea. And I think a lot of our moms love that idea. But first, tell us your story and why you wrote this.
Right. Well, I'm so excited to talk to the moms today because the very back part of my story is wanting a do-over for all of those years that I was raising my kids. I was feeding them a lot of sugar, a lot of convenient foods. We were a very busy sports-oriented family. And I found myself, as my kids were getting older, I was still not taking care of my health. And the day that my daughter graduated from high school, now she's my youngest, she graduated in June of 2015. I stepped on the scale, Becky, and I was devastated because the number that flashed back on me on the scale was the highest weight I had ever been. And at that time, I was counting my points, I was exercising, I was using an app, I was doing all the things, but it was just really soul crushing to me. But again, I was still in that mindset of taking care of everybody else before I was taking care of myself. But that was really the beginning of my wake up call. A couple months later, my husband and I went on our 25th anniversary trip to the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And that was a beautiful place to be. My husband had planned out some hikes for us. And unfortunately, when we got to Nymph Lake, I looked at the trail marker and it said half mile. And I thought, well, I could do that. I could do a half a mile. But unfortunately, I only got about halfway up that trail before I was gasping for air and before I told my husband I just couldn't go on any further. And the reason being that I couldn't climb up that trail, which was a fairly moderate trail, is because at that time I was 100 pounds overweight and the chronic health issues were piling up. I was morbidly obese, which is devastating to hear doctors say that you're morbidly obese. And I had pre-diabetes. I didn't feel well every day. I was about to be diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea and fatty liver disease. So all these things were happening in this year of 2015. And praise God. We talked about this a little bit before we hit record, but praise God. He is so good that he met me on the side of that mountain, and mountains being my favorite landscape. I sat down on a stump and I just remember praying, I just want to feel better. Lord, I just want to feel better. I didn't even pray, like, help me lose this 100 pounds, because at that point I had been yo yo dieting for 30 years, and I would lose a little, I would gain, I would lose a lot, I would gain more. So I was in that cycle for 30 years. So at the age of 48, sitting on that stump, um, God heard my prayer. And I came home from that trip in Colorado with a new resolve in my heart to take control of my health. And that was my take ownership moment. I went home, but I went home. I look back on that day and I know that I went home a different person, because I know that God intervened and he heard me.
Wow. Wow. So, okay. So I have so many questions, Christine. So many moms are listening right now and they're saying, yes, that's me. I've gained this weight, whether it's, 100 pounds, it's like your story, or maybe it's just 25, but they're stuck and they can't get out of it. And it's interesting here in the US. I don't think this is true around the world, but we sell the most dieting books. In fact, if you want to hit the New York Times bestseller list, the best thing you can write right now is a dieting book, right? So we are addicted to dieting, and yet we are at times obese. What in the world? Help us.
Right. Oh, I'm so glad you brought up dieting books, because my book is actually categorized as a diet book on Amazon in the categories, but it is not a diet book. SugarFreed is definitely going to be something different that we'll talk about that. But you're absolutely right. You can just look around in the USA. The food environment is making us sick and it's making us fat. And this is one reason I love to talk to faith-based communities, is I want to give them hope. Because what I learned, I have so many things to share with your listeners today, but what I learned is I was stuck in this cycle of eating food that I was told by these diet books were considered healthy, and things like everything in moderation just kept me spinning my wheels. Because unfortunately for women like me, who many women find themselves in this similar situation. They may have never been told it yet, but they have metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance or prediabetes or type 2
Okay, wait,
diabetes.
wait, wait. What
Yeah.
is metabolic?
Yeah.
Whatever you just
Okay.
said.
Yes, metabolic syndrome. So it's a condition for people who have like hypertension or a large waistline, high triglycerides. So put all of these things together, and you are basically, the easiest way to explain it is you're metabolically unhealthy. And what is contributing to this is the food that we're putting in our mouth. And the standard American diet does not serve women like me well. So I was continuing to eat a plate that I might have thought was, like, for example, a Weight Watchers friendly plate, but it was still loaded with a lot of carbohydrates, like whole wheat pasta or whole wheat bread or whole wheat rolls or a half a baked potato or a sweet potato, things like that. I learned that those things were contributing to my metabolic syndrome and to my insulin resistance. And those are things that I didn't hear for 30 years. So fast forward, coming home from this trip to Colorado, because of my diagnoses of the prediabetes and the fatty liver disease, I went down a lot of rabbit holes, Becky, a lot of rabbit holes. And I learned that something new and different was that weight loss is all about your hormones, your hormonal health. So I learned during that time that my insulin hormone was out of whack, my blood sugar was out of whack, and that was contributing to my inability to lose the weight with a standard American diet. And so then the key thing I learned is that sugar is a major hormone disruptor, and that set me on the path to stepping out into this sugar-freed lifestyle.
Okay, so now okay, so many of us, so many Americans are really addicted to sugar, and is there, I mean, am I correct in that? Is there an addictive element to sugar?
Absolutely. And I am being trained right now as a sugar addiction specialist. And I'm licensed. Yeah, I'm licensed to do a sugar assessment on my coaching clients, which is super powerful because it gives us a lot of insight into our behaviors with sugar. Sugar is hyper palatable, meaning the factories that are manufacturing these food products are making them so that we keep wanting more. Our and then our brain lights up. Our reward centers in our brain are saying, "Hey, I really like that you just ate a half a bag of Ruffles. How about some more?" And so it is very addictive. These foods that are full of carbohydrates, excess refined carbohydrates, and the seed oils, things like that, they just taste so good, and the crunch and the sweetness, all of that. So yes, definitely, I am 100% convinced that sugar is very addictive. I I testify all the time that I am a recovering food addict. I'm a recovering sugar addict, and I talk about gluttony a lot too because of the type of food that I was eating. There's no shut off valve. There was no shut off switch. You could continue to eat. And so I can look back on my food behaviors and also see that I was very greedy about the food that I was eating too.
Mhm. Now, you said something interesting in the beginning because you said, while you were raising your kids, you were a very busy family. You were running here, you were running there. And so you didn't take care of yourself. And I think, aside from the sugar addiction, I think so many moms can relate to that. But how does that not taking care of yourself, how does that end up in a food addiction?
Well, I was not taking care of myself by not making great choices for the food I was putting in my mouth. And one thing that I've learned in this journey of weight loss is that we could exercise till we're blue in the face, but the first choice has to be about the food that we're putting in our mouth. So being a busy mom, it was all about the convenience. It was about grabbing the quick junk food, the fast food when we're on our way to a meet or on our way to a skating competition, just get what we can, get the food in the bodies, things like that. So yeah, it's it was just a recipe for disaster as far as my health was concerned, needing something convenient, not really understanding, and I tried to follow diets all those years too, Becky. I can't tell you how many times I signed up for Weight Watchers. And I thought I was eating mostly the right things. I knew that the times that we would grab fast food, that wasn't a great choice. But again, it was about the convenience and it was about just getting things as quickly as possible. And also, I didn't have a desire at that time to really learn about and to focus on whole and nourishing foods. um, I really didn't, to be honest, I really didn't like to cook a lot then. And that was because all of it, I believe part of it too was that emotionally, I was not ready to regulate these emotions and these food coping behaviors that I was using. A lot of emotional background there, of course. And so just putting that all together, it was just something that I didn't truly invest my time. I didn't overall, the most important part, I did not invest my heart and I didn't turn this over to the Lord. So putting all that together, it was just, that's how I lived for 30 years.
Okay, so you come home from Colorado and you're like, okay, Lord, something has to change. What did you do first?
Yeah. So the first thing I did is I knew that my snoring was out of control. And being in Colorado, it made it 10 times worse. So I told my husband that when we got home, I would do a sleep study. And that is something I put off for 10 years. And I knew enough about hormonal health that poor sleep really is detrimental to your hormonal health. So I knew that a sleep study would be beneficial. I knew that I'd be coming home with a CPAP machine. And that really was the first medical intervention that put me on this path to sleeping better, to waking up more refreshed. And then something amazing happened, which is, I think, is the best part of my testimony, because all of those 30 years, despite being raised in a Christian family, going to church off and on throughout the years, I I did not have a close relationship with the Lord. I was what I call a casual Christian. So my Bible was collecting dust on the side of my bed. And when I started waking up refreshed after getting that CPAP machine, the Lord started putting on my heart to start picking up his word every day. And so I began doing that and I haven't set it down since. And so really, we talk about diet books, but really my Bible is the best guidebook that has carried me through this journey. And that is really the ultimate place where I have found my source of strength. And really the thing that has changed my life is developing and growing, nurturing this relationship with the Lord and learning about him and his word.
Yeah. So, okay, you start with a CPAP machine. CPAP. Yeah, my son has one. I should know how to say it. Okay, so you start by getting good sleep. What led you to, oh, sugar is the problem?
Yes. So shortly after I got home from that Colorado trip too, I started having painful ovarian cyst. And and then I had an ultrasound and it was discovered that I had fatty liver disease. Now, fatty liver disease can eventually progress into cirrhosis of the liver, which is irreversible. And I started learning, educating myself about why did my liver get full of fat? And again, it came back to the diet I was eating in our standard American diet. And despite not being someone that would sit down and eat a row of Oreo cookies or a half gallon of ice cream, I still was consuming a lot of sugar in the form of bread and potatoes and pasta and things like that. So I learned that sugar is a major hormone disruptor, and I just knew that I had to eliminate as much sugar from my diet as possible. And so that's what I decided to do. And I did it in a step by step approach. So that's really where the healing began, the physical healing.
Okay, so talk about that step by step approach because some of our listeners are like, "Oh, I need this, but tell me how."
Right. It's a very rare person that could show up one day and just quit all sugar completely. So I do coach a step by step approach. I'll give you an example of what I did that worked for me that I coached through. And then this is working for my coaching clients as well, too. But I made a determination the first sugar I was going to eliminate. I quit coffee cold turkey because I was having a little bit of coffee with a whole lot of flavored creamer, the sugar stuff. So I decided the best way to, just rip the band-aid off with starting this quitting sugar journey was with the coffee. And then a few days later, I decided, you know what? I worked in a corporate office at the time. I'm not going to eat all the candy that's sitting around on all of my workmates' desk. A couple of days later, I decided I'm not going to participate any longer in the birthday cake celebrations that we have. It seemed like every week someone was having a birthday. And I just began adding things like that. Eventually, a couple weeks into that, I started reading labels on factory items. And if there was any factory processed foods that had any added sugar in the ingredient labels, I stopped eating that. So within a couple of
It
weeks.
gets tricky there, because like if you're reading labels even on some of the salad dressings, and they can be low calorie salad dressings, and then all of a sudden you read how much sugar's in there and you're like, oh man, I'm defeating myself, because it says low fat, but it's got a lot of sugar. So that's tricky. It's tricky to read the labels and figure out what has sugar and what doesn't, right?
Absolutely. And the food manufacturers are kind of sneaky about it because they have all these different names for sugar. If you see a word on an ingredient label and it ends in OSE, no, that's a sugar. Whatever it is. Yep, that's a sugar. So if it ends in OSE, yeah, know that it's a sugar. I have a whole like a whole one-page list of all the names of sugar on food manufacturer labels. So yeah, it can be tricky. And also it was a major mindset shift for me. I'm glad you brought up the low fat because that was the craze for so many years. I mean, that's been going on for decades. And I think that has not served Americans well at all because what has happened during that time frame, we have just gotten more and more obese and now it's an epidemic. So my mindset now is I 100% believe for me, for someone who has a metabolism like me, which a lot of people that struggle with obesity would find themselves feeling or, being very similar. But for me, the problem was sugar. It wasn't like having to stay with a low fat diet. What I needed to do was eliminate the sugar and then to stop being afraid of the healthy fats like olive oil and coconut oil and things like that. So I did a complete swap in the way I was eating. I ditched the sugar and I stopped being afraid of a low fat diet, or I'm sorry, a higher fat diet, but it is not high fat, it's healthy fats. It's the fats that are in the food that God created for us, like in the beef and in the eggs and in the dairy products. So Yeah, it was a complete shift, but that's really what worked for me.
So have you given up like all processed foods?
Yes, I have. Like the only
Okay,
thing,
so because like cheese is a dairy product, but I think it's processed. Yeah.
well, it's aged. It's aged. Yeah. I tend to stay away from like shredded cheese in the bags that have fillers to it, just to keep it fresh and stuff. So I would prefer to like just buy a block of aged cheese, an aged cheddar cheese or but yeah, so for the most part, one of the quick tips I love to give is that to find that food closest to the way God created it, I call it God's good smorgasbord, is to shop the perimeter of your grocery store because that's where you're going to find all of those healthy foods, your meat, your dairy, your produce, and your fish, your eggs, and those are all on the perimeter of your grocery store.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. So, we've all heard a lot about carbohydrates, and that they're bad for us and all of that, for all the bread lovers out there, that's just a sad thing, but true. Um, so when you gave all this up, do you ever crave carbohydrates anymore?
No, interestingly enough, as a recovering sugar addict, the more closer to as clean of a way of eating that you can get, you really can quiet those cravings. And I really think that cravings is the root of so much of our problems when it comes to our health. We're craving the sugar because our brains are telling us, "Hey, I want that reward." They're hyper palatable, and we just love them, right? And a lot of them are called comfort foods for a reason. So then we're also comforting ourselves with them. So we are craving things emotionally. And for me, and I learned that I had been craving all the wrong things for so many years, trying to fill all these holes in my soul. And that's because of the absence of my relationship with Jesus. And now that I have, discovered so much more about him in his word, and I can't go a day without being satisfied and nourished by him first and foremost. That's what's filling up the holes in my soul now. So that helps with the emotional regulation too. But once the physically and physiologically, think of it like an alcoholic. You would not tell an alcoholic to just drink one beer because they're addicted to the alcohol. They need to abstain from it. So by me abstaining from as much sugar as possible in my way of eating, the only sugars I really eat now are like the sugars that would break down from cauliflower or broccoli, or the little bit yeah, I do eat fruit occasionally too. Berries are the lowest in sugar, so when I do eat fruit, I choose berries. But yeah, so you just the more further away you get from eating that way, the quieter the new. And a lot of people like me have also, recovering food addicts. There's a lot of food chatter going on in our head all the time. Like I used to constantly think like, where is my next meal coming from? When we're traveling, where are we going to stop and eat? All I was so focused on and fixated on food, and that's just all part of the food addiction behaviors.
So now you're eating completely different. You've lost like 100 pounds. You look fabulous. So when you are traveling, how do you eat clean as best as possible? Like you're right now, you shared with me before we started recording that you're at a retreat, so retreats are famous for serving, all manner of junk food. So, like, how do you handle that, Christine?
Yeah, the longer you do it, the easier it gets. I promise. I promise. I know it sounds really difficult to understand, to be around people eating food that I choose not to eat anymore. And it is a mindset thing. I know that I could eat those foods if I wanted to, because a lot of times people will say to me like, "Oh, I forgot you can't eat that." And I'll be like, "Well, I can eat that if I wanted to, but right now I choose not to for my health. And it really is, Becky, it's really just a matter of not being able to unsee what I've seen. Like I have seen the healing that has happened, and there's no way that I want to go back to that. And honestly, truthfully, people probably don't even believe me when I say this, but I can sit in a retreat with a room full of women eating, they're all eating brownies and ice cream and chips and all that thing. It really doesn't have a pull on my heart, and it doesn't drag me down, if that makes sense. Like I don't feel bad, I don't feel uncomfortable, I don't feel anything about it. It's just the way I live now.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what the feelings underneath that drive the addiction. Can you share with us some of those and what drove the addiction in the first place? Because there has to be healing for that as well.
Yes. Yeah. I always tell my coaching clients that the emotional part of this journey, that healing part, is going to be the most difficult. It is very hard work. I can tell people what to eat, what not to eat, like this is the best way, and we can do that. But once we quiet that food noise and that food chatter, like we finally discover, oh, I'm not really craving sugar today, then we can start beginning working on the deeper rooted issues. And for most of us, my story is that I did start gaining weight in elementary school. And so I did have some years of being a chubby kid, and I was bullied a lot. Um, I carried that weight with me, and it really made me grow up into a young woman, a teenage girl, a young woman off to college. And I felt like I never fit in anywhere. Like I physically eventually I didn't fit in roller coaster seats. I almost didn't fit in airplane seats. But if I was to walk into a room full of beautiful women, I would look around and I would feel like I don't fit in here. Like there is no place here. So that's where a lot of the hard work comes in, because now I know, like, putting myself in that situation, I always felt like everybody was watching me, like watching what I'm eating and questioning, why is she eating that? She shouldn't be eating that. These are the thoughts going around in my mind in those situations. But now, like, you go through this journey and you heal from all the things like that. And now I realize that people weren't they weren't thinking about me. Most people just sit around and think about themselves, right?
Yep,
So
yep, absolutely. So, okay, we're just about out of time, Christine. But what's one tip you could give our listeners to start breaking the pattern, the destructive pattern of being addicted to this sugar?
Right. Well, I want to give hope for the faith based audience because with God, all things are possible. I never, ever would have been able to do this without inviting the Lord into this journey. And it's really surprising to me when I coach women. One of the first things they say to me is, I never thought to invite God into this journey. And I say it's surprising, but it doesn't shock me because that's exactly where I was for 30 long years. And, really, the Bible is the best place, the best guidebook for life. And I never really thought that God cared about how I cared about my health, but He really does. He does care about how we treat our temple. And when I always say that when we feel better, we serve better. And so I don't know. I know Becky, you and I feel like we have a lot of years ahead of us to serve women and to serve the people that God has called us to serve. And I want to be able to do it with the best of my health and to the best of my ability. So I just want to give hope for healing for anybody out there that feels hopeless, because I know what it feels like to be stuck in a yo-yo dieting cycle. I did it for 30 years. I call it my weary, wandering weight loss woes. There is a way to yeah, there is a way to break free. And, God is the chain breaker. Every morning I wake up and I surrender my food choices to the Lord. And it really is a daily surrender. And I'm not perfect every day. And it's just like a sanctification journey. We are going to grow, we are going to get stronger, we're going to get healthier. And it's just my absolute delight to be able to encourage women to, be willing to step out on this journey. If we don't show up to do the hard things, nothing's going to change. And it really is all about the heart. It really, like, the weight loss was amazing, but when we change our heart and trust the Lord in a difficult situation like this, that's where I just can't stop praising him for all the ways that he's healed my life and is helping me help other women do the same.
Okay, so where can our listeners get your book, Christine?
Okay, my book, SugarFreed, Stop Losing the Weight Loss Battle, Start Gaining the Victory, is available on Amazon. And I have a free chapter excerpt on my website. If you go to my website, ChristineTrimpe.com, you can grab a free sample while you wait for your book to get delivered from Amazon.
Great, great. Okay, well, friends, thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of The Connected Mom. And I do hope that if you are discouraged in your whole weight journey, that's such a thing, that you will contact Christine. I know she also offers coaching, and that might be extremely beneficial for you. But go ahead and order her book on Amazon, and maybe gather a few friends who are in the same journey, who can be a community and form connections around you. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again next week for another episode of The Connected Mom.